It was a bit something of nothing, wasn't it, really? If you're going to do a reshuffle, do a reshuffle. We all knew Ben Wallace was going, and as you said at the opening of the programme, Michael, as someone who's held that post as Defence Secretary, you've got to have the confidence of the heads of the armed services. Whether Grant Shapps has got that, I don't know. And I think it's a shame that Rishi Sunak has again gone for loyalists rather than competence or talent. I mean, Grant Shapps is a great survivor. He's had, 5 cabinet posts, Home Secretary for 6 days, I think it was. Claire Coutinho, relatively unknown, only came into Parliament 2019, now becomes the new Energy and Net Zero Secretary, which is a huge, huge brief if the government is going to take it seriously, which they appear not to be doing. But we've still got Suella Braverman, who is... She's very, very divisive, let's put it like that. That's a kind way of saying it. And I think, Ben Wallace was widely respected. He has done a very good job. Why did he go now? Couldn't Rishi Sunak have kept him there until the election? Or did he want him out of the way and have a loyalist instead if there are defence cuts looming?
Well... it's not a crime to have a loyalist in a position. Indeed, to have somebody who supports the Prime Minister could be quite a useful thing. And you've made the point on the way through that actually Grant Shapps is immensely experienced. He came into Parliament in 2005, the same year as Ben Wallace. He has been almost continuously in office, not quite. He has held a number of cabinet positions. I would have thought the Ministry of Defence might be quite flattered to get such a senior politician. Could you not read it that way?
Well, you could. I mean, I think it depends how much he is willing to at least appear to be listening to the heads of the armed forces. We know there are cuts, we know there are pressures financially in every aspect of government spending, and defence doesn't escape that. We know there's the ongoing pressure and demands from Ukraine for more help. We know also, that there are threats to us as global security shifts, whether that's China or Russia or wherever. And there's that close relationship between Defence and Home Secretary in terms of security and cybersecurity and all of those sort of things. So if Grant Shapps is able to bring that level of, and you quite rightly say, that level of competence and experience, but without seeming to sort of disregard the military personnel, then he'll probably do a good job. I mean, maybe it's just a caretaker job until next autumn when there's an election. Who knows?
Charlie, what did you make of it? I mean, some people have been saying, Ben Wallace had been in the army and we ought to have a Defence Secretary who's been in the armed forces. But actually, that was not the case for many years. I mean, until Tom King, I think, was Defence Secretary, they had all been in the military, but thereafter there was a whole succession of Defence Secretaries, including me, who were not in the army. And I think also you can view this both ways. I think I'm right in saying Ben Wallace was a captain. James Heapy, whose name was mentioned a lot, was a major. So when you're dealing with generals and admirals, it's not necessarily a terrific passport to say, well, I reached the rank of captain or major.
Exactly so, and I think, look, Margaret Thatcher wasn't in the armed forces, but she was arguably the best leader that we had in terms of military sort of expertise when it came to the Falklands. But you're right, it can be a help or a hindrance at times if you are an expert or a perceived expert in your field coming in as a Secretary of State or a Minister. Because you bring that attachment, you sometimes miss some of the obvious areas that the department is making. So if you can come in with a fresh pair of eyes, not having outside of experience, that can be a positive. And I think, the whole reshuffle itself with Claire Coutinho and Grant, they are both well-liked, well-equipped and well-known within the Conservative Party and, its members. And I think, it will help secure Rishi Sunak's position, I think, because, backbench MPs and the party will come together to support them. I think what Joe was saying was an interesting point because the relationship between the Home Secretary and the Defence Secretary is one that I think you'll need to keep an eye on. I'd never support necessarily using the armed forces or going to your defence or military chiefs as a first port of call to help with domestic issues. It should always be a last resort, but they did fantastic work when it came to building the Nightingale hospitals. They've helped with internal security in the past. It may be, upon hearing the news that you've had the largest number of boat crossings in the Channel only yesterday, that there might be a wider role for the Ministry of Defence to take, not in terms of military action, but operationally internationally to help with the stopping of the small boats. That might be something why Rishi Sunak has looked to Grant Shapps as an effective communicator and someone with that experience in many cabinet roles to help deal with that particular crisis.
I thought Joe made a very good point that he has to listen. I think that's probably the most important thing in the Ministry of Defence. It is to listen and it is to be organised, because, of course, they're very organised. So, I mean, to me, the secret of being a minister anyway was about, you know, having your meetings on time, stating what the purpose of the meeting was, summing up the meeting, ending on time, and making sure the actions were taken. Now, if that's true of every ministry, it is absolutely true in spades of the Ministry of Defence. Can I just broaden the questions? The Suella Braverman was mentioned there. Do you think that the Conservative government has to reorganise its cabinet between now and the next general election? Do we think that Suella Braverman is some sort of handicap?
Well, I think yes in the answer to your first part of the question, because I think, look, you know, as this reshuffle's indicated, that Rishi is looking to the future with people like Claire Katina, who's one of the 2019 intakes, first of that cohort to get around the cabinet table. So I think when you come to an election, you want your best communicators around the table. You want your fresh pair of eyes, fresh ideas, a cabinet that can reflect all of the talents of the Conservative Party and the country. Whether or not Suella has been able by then to demonstrate to the country and to the Prime Minister that the Home Office has got a grip on some of the issues that it clearly hasn't had in the past, such as the small boats issue or, you know, losing people in hotels, things like that, I think will blot her sort of mark, if I can put it like that. So I think it's one to watch, but I think there'll certainly be a wider reshuffle in the autumn. Whether Suella stays or not, we'll just have to wait and see.
Joe, very briefly, if you would, does the Cabinet really matter very much? I mean, the battle lines are drawn. It's going to depend enormously on whether the government can get anywhere near fulfilling the pledges on which it's committed itself. Does it really matter who the 20 people sitting around the table are?
Only in the sense that they are who we, the public, see. And so they are the voices that we hear on the radio, on the television, we read their interviews in the paper. They are the public face of government, if you like. You know, they're the managers of the shop. So, yes, they do matter in a way. And, you know, the small boats thing, well, any fool could tell you the weather's been lovely. I've come in this morning from the Kent coast. There will be more crossings today. It's as flat as a mill pond. It's the weather that changes everything. And even Suella Braverman can't change the weather.
But we have been discussing the political weather. And I thank you both very much indeed for coming in on a Sunday morning.